So if you're not a fan of the words peak fiction, goat, raw, fire, click off of the video. Cause those are gonna come up like 50 times in here, man.
In this video, I'm going to recommend an anime called Ashita No Joe, but I'll have to add a couple of caveats to that recommendation in the aims of providing a fair and balanced assessment. The anime is like really old, like one of the first long-running anime ever produced, so some parts don't look up to snuff with modern productions. The sound design is also very poorly mixed, and there are often very loud spikes on old equipment that can interrupt your immersion in the story. There are also some parts that haven't aged as well. The comedy is kind of annoying. There's a weight loss arc that doesn't really make that much sense. Oh, and just skip episodes 37 to 39 of part 2, okay? I'm doing you a massive favor, okay? And the main character is a completely unlikable asshole for a good 30 or so episodes into the series. And in spite of all of that, Ashita No Joe is one of the most poignant stories ever told in the history of the medium. Even 5 decades after its airing, its influence has grown past its critical acclaim to shape the nature of anime on TV, including some of my personal favorite anime of all time. It's a show, despite all its flaws, that has touched my soul deeply, and I believe everyone should watch it, which is why I'm making this video. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why you should watch Ashita No Joe. Oh, and this video contains minor spoilers for side plots and characters, but I do not spoil any of Joe's fights or the plot related to him or any other major character. Ashita No Joe tells the story of Joe Yabuki, a boxer from the slums of Doyamachi who starts the show, as I previously stated, a completely unlikable asshole. He is rude, violent, has committed many crimes, and is overall someone that is hard to watch, much less root for. He is the complete antithesis to the shonen protagonist with hearts of gold. Joe is just an asshole, and he stays that way for a long time. But not forever. The show is lengthy, so we get to see him grow and evolve with the time necessary to illustrate great change in one's character. It almost becomes sort of a character study, following someone through the most pivotal years of one's life to show how we all can become champions, even if we come from nothing. You hear it many times later into the series. They say Joe smells like iron, a beast that is very hard. And we've seen it when he starts the show as a bratty 14-year-old. He hates being caged in and ordered what to do, and he has a hard time communicating with the people around him without using his fists, or sometimes his entire body. And you can see how this affects other characters, one being Dampei, who starts the show as a hapless drunk, lost in his former glory as a boxing coach. He sees Joe as his last hope, someone that can become a great boxer, but Joe has no business with him at all. Now, this is quite reasonable. Everyone else calls him a failure, and it's hard to see anything coming of him either. But he too grows to support Joe, quitting alcohol, sometimes, mailing him boxing tips, setting him up with the tools and training necessary to even box at all, as seen with the fight against Aoyama early in the series. Some of those painful scenes involve Joe abandoning or disgracing Dampei, despite all the love and care he's provided him. I think this point is important because it shows that Joe is affected by other people, in the same way that he affects others. The entire show, you can tell that Joe wouldn't have been the person he was without characters like Dampei, Yoko, and Nishi. He doesn't just become a great boxer by choosing to become one, but because of Joe's relationship with someone else. I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire show comes after Joe has escaped prison. He's already trapped on an island, and escaping the prison is entirely futile. All he sees is a vast open ocean. I can only imagine what the sight would stir in someone had his only experience in existence as a wandering vagabond, surviving day to day on stolen food and sleeping on benches or sheds. He tries to cross it only to fall deep into the ocean. Then he comes to mind. The vendetta against Rikishi is the driving force for Joe as a character, and most of part 1 is illustrating their relationship. They couldn't be less alike. Rikishi is tall, calm, and has a professional attitude when it comes to the people he talks to, especially women. Joe, on the other hand, is, well... And when they first meet, they hate each other. He disses his sort of girlfriend Yoko and is willing to cheat and trash talk when they fight each other. But slowly, they grow to respect one another as they both work to meet each other once again in the ring. A long and grueling process that takes their toll on each other. I think this is what makes Joe so refreshing, as it feels like the shonen formula distilled into its very essence, without the need for fantastical settings, complex power systems, or large-scale organizations. It is, at its core, a story of two people wanting to beat the living shit out of each other. Ashita No Joe was originally a manga penned by writer-artist duo Iki Kajiwara and Tetsuya Chiba, and started publication in January of 1968, but then became an anime adaptation in April of 1970, directed by Osamu Dezaki. And I cannot understate the influence Osamu Dezaki has had on TV anime. The very existence of anime on television was due to many concessions pioneered by Astro Boy, including looping animation, openings and endings, repeated use of frames, and other techniques such as cuts, pans, zooms, low-budget framing. Osamu Dezaki, noting these restrictions, is still able to develop a style onto himself, developing many techniques that you still see in anime today: triple takes, split screen, reused theme music, visual filters and effects to simulate lighting and camera zooms, and even the idea of deviating from the source material at all. Almost all these techniques were pioneered by Dezaki, which is what makes Ashita No Joe, despite the datedness of the animation, feel somewhat familiar, even cinematic at times. I think this comes through the best during the fights of Ashita No Joe, which have a lot of impact in ways that you wouldn't expect from an anime from the 70s. There's quick zooms and punches, enough obscuring with the camera to feel the impact and chaoticness of these brawls. Okay, little gripe here. Part 1 has a lot of reaction shots, which is probably a cost/time saving technique, and it kills these fights a little, but they come up way less in common in Part 2, okay? Capiche? The sound design also adds to the fights, which often breaks from reality with bangs and long perturbing echoes. And there's a lot more I could go into, but I would just be repeating the words of people that are far more researched than I. Go watch Karabakun's Osamu Dezaki video for more info. The point I'm making is that Ashita No Joe is often very thrilling to watch, and nothing emphasizes that more than its postcard memories. A postcard memory is those scenes in anime that often are very well drawn. They kind of look like paintings. They often aren't animated, and zoom or pan to emphasize the impact of a certain moment. You've probably seen these before. They appear in almost every critically acclaimed show with the willingness to sell a certain moment. It heightens drama, leaves you on a somber note, concludes with finality, what have you. And Ashita No Joe is full of them. Very specifically in Part 2. And with its improved animation makes it one of the most visually stunning anime I've ever seen. The impact of these moments cannot be undersold. It is just breathtaking sometimes. Ashita No Joe is one of the first long-running TV anime. To most people, that probably doesn't mean much, but I think some historical context can embolden the experience of watching the show. During the post-war period of Japan, the economic disparity was rampant in many parts outside of Tokyo. You can literally see this in the first shot of the anime, Joe walking among the slums while Tokyo Tower, a building created to mimic the Eiffel Tower, looms in the background like a hypocritical specter. This scene heightens this disparity in such a striking way, which can feel like whiplash, as all we hear about Japan is the technological and societal advancements. But Ashita No Joe shows that it wasn't always like that. This was to the point where the manga, which ran from 1968 to 1973, had a fanbase comprised of New Left students and the poor working class. The same people that participated in the Vietnam War protests against the United States in Japan at the time. I'm pretty sure a lot of those youth supported the spread of communism after providing land and resources to a country that had just destroyed them a few decades ago. Art made at the time was, of course, escapism made to heal the country that had been the only recipients of the atomic bomb. But criticism of this very industry existed even as far back as the 1970s, with the most impactful being the film Throw Away Your Books or Rally in the Streets. Ashita No Joe unlike others of his kin like Astro Boy or Speed Racer, concerns itself with the reality of rural areas during this time within the character of Joe, an orphaned vagabond, eating what he could find and sleeping where he could rest. Joe, back in the 70s, represented the anti-authority, bratty teen comparable to Holden Caulfield, which resonated with the youth having to grow up in this era of lax artistic restrictions and political unrest. Now, Joe Part 2 takes place in the 80s, and if you know anything about the Japanese economic miracle, then you know I'm about to contradict everything I previously said. Due to, generally speaking, improved education and development of advanced technologies and a streamlined workforce, the Japanese economy skyrocketed to the second largest, right below the United States of course. And Ashita No Joe 2 revels in this very fact, not just complemented by an improved art style, but an illustration of a more fruitful society. City pop plays from the radios as the pachinko parlors ring around, dancing and motorcycles run along the streets, and as Joe rises in the boxing world, the slums of Doimachi transforms as the trash-littered streets are cleared and large buildings emerge. There's this one arc in the anime where they go to Hawaii for a match, and the whole arc felt like bliss. Oh my god. Palm trees, swimming pools, dining by the fire, the beach at night, all of it. Oh, so good. So good. I went to Hawaii twice in my life, and the feeling of the humid air came back to me while watching this. I just want to put some lamp over the Switch so bad. I'd make an AMV, okay? I might. So, how does one reconcile with this discrepancy? I mean, they seem diametrically opposed to one another, this sort of historical dissonance in understanding. Well, personally, I think they can both coexist. The story of Joe Yabuki's rise in the boxing world mirrors the economic rise of an entire country, and also how one man can affect his entire community. It's a beautiful story which takes its time showing one man's growth from a rebellious teen to a mature and strong adult. But at his heart, he still remains that orphan vagabond, someone who fights only for his own motives, everyone else be damned. You see it in the ring, and other boxers see it in him as well. It's hard to explain without spoiling, but just take my word on it. There remains an eternal part of Joe that's stuck on that beach, the one I showed earlier in this video. I think what a lot of people miss when discussing the show is the idea that Ashita No Joe is a story of one man, when that couldn't be further from the truth. The world of Joe is like our own world, full of people you might meet in your everyday life. Grocers, high school students, businessmen, working class, criminals, housewives, bratty children, boxers, and everyone in between. Ashita No Joe is a depiction of Japanese society of a certain era, but going beyond that, it's an illustration of the lives many of us still lead. It shows how Joe, through his rise in the boxing world, is able to brighten the lives of those around him. This affects even the most insignificant of side characters, like Jiro Shiora, the fucking anime original delinquent who sees how cool Joe's boxing is and quits ditching class to one day become a boxer like Joe. Or Wolf Kunigisha, who has to borrow money from Joe after he gets drafted into the Yakuza, but eventually pays it off through the goodwill that Joe and Wolf have for each other, thanks to his generosity. Or my personal favorite, Aoyama, who teaches Joe the technique of blocking and positioning with the help of Danpei, but appears later as a normal salaryman. Aoyama is small, weak, and has no space in the boxing ring at all, but he still sees Joe's accomplishments as something beautiful that he was able to witness. This isn't even getting to the relationship Joe has with his opponents. Trust me, that's something best experienced spoiler-free. Of my experience watching the show, the strangest detail I've noticed is the massive surge of fans that found the show in this decade, with the number of fans nearly doubling in a little over 3 years. Some may attribute this to the anime Megalobox, a spin-off of Ashita No Joe that aired in 2018, with a sequel that aired in 2021, but I highly doubt that is the only determining factor in leading one to watch a nearly 100 episode show. I think people had a lot of time off due to a certain virus, and were stuck indoors for a very long time. So a narrative about someone improving themselves through, well, to put it simply, exercise, might have been the motivation needed for some people to improve their own lives or take up a sport or stay in shape. It also feels like a show that we need in a time like this. I don't want to get too political, but I don't think this culture overall has a very good idea on what to do with masculinity. So a show like Ashita No Joe that portrays masculinity in a nuanced, honest, and positive way is something a lot of men need in the age of internet guru grifters that sell a product more often than they sell advice. I know this sounds corny, but to many of the fans of the show, Joe is an icon, and his story has left a profound, real impact on the lives who have seen his journey.
It made me realize despite all these hardships anyone can go through while doing something they have a passion for, at the end of the day, you love doing it. And there will be times in which you do end up losing your passion or you're just burnt out. But once you come back, it's like falling in love with your hobby all over again. There's a scene in Ashita No Joe 2, the sequel series to the original, that brilliantly portrayed Joe's love for the sport that he initially started on a whim. Seeing him just remember what he loved doing, seeing him just shadowbox in the streets and come back to the friends he has, it's just so beautiful, and reasons why I love this story so much.
It's the true spirit of masculinity. It's catharsis, the feeling of relief and happiness from the completion of a job well done. It's the emotion humanity always looks for in everything that they do. The reason they keep living.
Now, I can only see grander goals, to burn brighter than life or death. Good men set themselves ablaze and die within that passion. Heroes light themselves on fire in order to guide others. For that reason, I will set myself ablaze as many times as necessary. I will burn everything away until nothing remains but pure white ash.
This is a concept very core to the themes of Ashita No Joe. One may even say it's its main takeaway. But the depth of its meaning is something you have to live. It's not a show you can watch or an analysis you can write. So whatever I say here, I ask you to see what you have seen in yourself, rather than just taking my words at face value. Ashita No Joe is one of my favorite anime, and it's for all the reasons I've previously stated throughout this whole video. But it's also the effect it's had on my own life, how it made me reflect on my own masculinity and question what a single man can do with his youth. You see, I am and have always been not the most athletic guy. I did gymnastics when I was like 10, but since then I've never partaken in a sport or even competition in a very, very long time. And this extends to every aspect of my life. I aim to get things done as simply and efficiently as possible, barely putting in the necessary effort for good grades or quality work. Maybe because all of that was painful and stress-inducing, and I saw school as mostly a waste of time over a place for learning, taking me away from the most important activity, Clash Royale, and watching anime. So seeing a character like Joe was like looking at a polar opposite version of myself. Someone that embodies all the elements I do not. That manly grit, the confident, cocky smile, that infinite well of passion that burns like the light on the hill. It was all completely alien to me. I knew that there were people that pursued their goals with everything they had, and I saw it as completely unnecessary, a waste of time. I mean, come on, anyone that plays fucking Clash Royale is no person to speak about wasted time, holy shit. What Joe did for me was show the beauty, the heights of passion in the human spirit, and the brilliance of seeing someone give it all they have to be the best. The more you give for that fire, the brighter it burns. I think that's something worth sacrificing for. I go to a community college as of now, and I'm very bad with people. I pretty much shut myself off from the outside world. I do all my work from my room, and I barely leave the house. I can feel my body catching up with me. The routine I've been repeating for how many years has finally taken its toll. That's why I started this YouTube channel, to spend the time I've been afforded creating something that will actually last. What I've come against is the realization I'm incredibly fucking lazy, and it's something almost a part of me at this point. But in spite of its difficulty in even making a single video, trust me, it's pretty difficult and time consuming. I see it as something extremely important, to take that burning passion that dwells within me and channel it into something beautiful. It's something Joe did. It's something many of the fans of Ashita No Joe did. And I guess I'm the new kid on the block. I hope this fire burns. Burns until there is nothing left but pure white ash. Now go watch Ashita No Joe!